It's been about 1 year since the NCAA-CHL rule change, and let me tell you, there's been a lot of changes that have happened since, so stick around to see what those changes are in the recruiting process and in the hockey landscape as a whole. What's going on, guys? For those of you who don't know me, my name is Braden Pearl, and I'm the founder of Advancement Hockey Advising, where we've helped countless players move on to various levels in hockey. So last year, we made our predictions that this rule change would have a significant impact on the hockey landscape, which you can check out right here. But the short version of it is that we basically predicted that NCAA D1 coaches would mainly recruit from the CHL moving forward. And let's see if that actually transpired, if that trickle-down effect would actually occur. So let's see and dive into the data now. So let's first look at the CHL to NCAA D1 data. So as of the rule change and as of filming today, October 10th, 2025, I know now that's a different day, it's a few months down the line, but as of filming today, there's 177 players from the CHL that committed to NCAA D1 in the past season, which is pretty drastic. So if we look, we have 79 that committed from the WHL, 59 that committed from the OHL, and 39 that committed from the QMJHL altogether. And this is just for the upcoming season here to NCAA D1. If you're looking at the future season, so 2026-27, and then 2027-28, there's another 95 commitments on top of that. So altogether, there's about, I would say, 260, 270 total commitments altogether to the NCAA D1 level from the CHL just in 1 year. That is drastic. That really shows you that all the coaches are flocking to the CHL to recruit. So you might be asking yourself why the players themselves are actually accepting to go play NCAA D1 versus just going straight to pro. Well, there's still a small subset of players, like the elite of the elite, that go straight to the NHL afterwards, right? So they don't even bother with NCAA, but some of them still choose to have that NCAA D1 commitment just in case, especially if the goal is more to go like minor pro and then work your way up and then go to pro. So for a player, if you think about it, it's a lot more advantageous to go play NCAA D1, develop for a few years, and then go to high-end pro when you're ready, versus going to play, minor pro, let's say it's like the SPHL, the Coast, or some minor pro leagues in Europe, right? The development's not as good in those leagues, and it's better to go play NCAA D1 where you're competing day in and day out and really developing to get to that next level and get ready to go to high-end pro, whether it's the AHL, the NHL, or other high-end pro leagues as well. So let's look at the USHL stats now from commitments to NCAA D1. So if we look at the year prior, so 2023-24, basically it was 348 total commitments, okay? So the USHL was the pipeline basically before this rule change. Now if we look at last year's season, so 2024-25, only 190 commitments. Now that's still quite a few, right? It's not saying there's no commitments at all, but if you look at it, there's almost half a drop off in total commitments from the USHL, namely because a lot of players moved on from the USHL, went to the CHL, and not so many went from the CHL to the USHL. So USHL is still a really good place to go, still tier 1 junior hockey, some of the best players go and play in that league. However, you do see a bit of a drop off, and you do see the CHL as winning altogether in terms of the commitments compared to the USHL. Maybe that'll even out over time. Maybe it'll go more in the trend of the CHL. I think that's what's going to happen over time, but still overall the USHL is still a really good spot to go to if your goal is to be recruited to play NCAA D1 hockey. Now let's look at the BCHL's numbers here. So the year prior, if we're looking at it, it's 251 total commitments. So obviously a little bit less than the USHL, but overall still a really good spot, right? The year prior to go to the BCHL. This actual year, it was basically 125. So again, chopped in about half, okay? Chopped actually exactly half of that amount. So overall, you do see that, the trend is that, coaches are recruiting less from these leagues. They are still recruiting from there, but a little bit, quite a bit less altogether. They're flocking more towards the CHL. So you're seeing like this half chop basically from the leagues that used to be flocked to by NCAA D1 coaches. But overall, still BCHL, still a very good spot, still does have quite a few NCAA D1 commitments overall. All right, now let's move on to the NAHL, and this one's gonna be the biggest shocker here. So 2023-24, basically the total amount of commitments were 246, okay? Last year, 2024-25, the total commitments to NCAA D1 were 68. So if you think about that, that's almost like chopped like times 4. So it's almost a quarter of what they used to get. So quite a big drastic change for the NAHL, and it's a very, very big league, right? So 68 D1 commitments altogether in a really big league. That means probably only about 2 to 3 commits per team on average, okay? Much less than it used to be, right? Where it used to be like 7 to 8 D1 commitments on average. So you do see the NA being very affected. And quickly, if we're looking at the other junior leagues too that are tier 2 that used to move on some players to NCAA D1, the stats clearly show us that each league basically has had like that half or like a 3x chop down rate for the D1 commitments last year compared to before. Now, obviously there's our subjective view too. And from what I've been hearing when I've been talking to coaches, we've actually went to the rink to an Armada game a couple weeks ago, me and Stefano. We ran into Clarkson there, we ran into Merrimack, we ran into Brown, and all of them pretty much say the same thing. We're like, oh, like, is this mainly where you're recruiting out of now? Like, who you looking at? All that stuff. And they were saying we only really look at tier 1 guys now, which is sad to say. You know, it's just the new reality of the rule now. But basically they're mainly looking at tier 1 guys, and they'll pick up the odd tier 2 guy from there. But that's the mentality of these high-end D1 coaches moving forward now for recruiting. Now, there is a bit of a side note before I wrap things up here that I want to mention, and that's the pro to amateur rule is quite a gray zone right now, especially when it comes to, you know, if this player signs a contract, how long until they can come back to NCAA hockey. If they sign a big contract, they get drafted, what does that mean? You know, some rules are clear, but there's other rules that are quite a bit of gray zones, which is causing a lot of volatility. We're seeing guys that like played in the coast and then they come back to NCAA, and it's a whole mess right now, to be honest. I don't think when the NCAA cleared this rule last year that they thought of all the second and third order effects. So there's a lot of volatility right now, but I'm assuming, I'm hoping anyways, that the NCAA takes care of this and puts like clear guideposts and clear guidelines as to what can be done and can't be done anytime soon. I'd really urge, if somebody from the NCAA is watching this, please actually get on this, because it's causing a lot of volatility for the staff, for the players, for the coaches, and it's not a good development model overall. So what does this mean for you guys? Well, it basically means that the whole landscape of hockey, everything as a player just got harder, right? It's been much harder this past year to get recruited because coaches have more players to choose from and higher standards to choose from. That being said, it's not like all bleak and terrible, right? There's good ways to frame this, and there's good positive things that will come out of it. The first thing is, for guys who play like a few major junior games and then they got cut or something like that, they're no longer ineligible to play NCAA hockey. That's a huge thing for hockey players, because now it's not a not knowing type thing. It's NCAA is going to recruit the best players that they possibly can. So those players are going to be saved from this rule right here. The second big thing that you can frame it where it's a positive is that it just forces you to train that much harder, to be that much better, and to compete that much more, okay? If you do everything you're supposed to do day in and day out, do your workouts, practice hard, play hard every single shift. You never know who's watching, but every single shift, every single play, you try and make something happen. If you're the best that you can absolutely be, at that point, you're increasing your odds of getting noticed and getting recruited. So force yourself to do this, because it did get that much harder, but if you frame it the right way and you work every single day, there is positive that can come out of this rule change here. And that is a wrap for the video, my friends. Click here or here if you want to keep watching. If you haven't already, absolutely destroy that subscribe button, hit that like button, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another video moving forward. Thank you so much for watching, guys. You can ask us any questions in the comments below, and we will catch you on that next one.